Two major stimulus events happening at the same time. In today's stimulus package update and daily news update, student loan forgiveness for 70,000 borrowers, the Fed hiking interest rates in March, inflation going back down to a manageable 2%, President Biden's big stimulus meeting with top CEOs, and finally, new dates for the Build Back Better 2.0. Pretty exciting stuff, guys, here, so definitely stick around. All right, now let's get started with some prime grade A stimulus. 70,000 student loan borrowers have definitely been breathing just a little bit easier with their student loan debt wiped totally clean. That's right, the Department of Education just announced the latest public service forgiveness loan numbers. Now, the overhaul of the controversial loan forgiveness program was projected to erase the debt of 22,000 students who had outstanding loans and the efforts in the first weeks. 3 months in, more than triple that figure have had their student loan debts wiped out. Now, the loan forgiveness initiative, which was rolled out in 2007, was designed to entice people to work as teachers, police officers, firefighters, or other public service jobs. After 10 years of working in the jobs and making payments, their college debt would be erased. Now, the problem was that requirements were so freaking hard, almost no one got their student loans forgiven. Things changed for the better when they loosened the standards in October. 3 months in, data from the department shows roughly 70,000 borrowers have qualified for nearly $5 billion in relief. And they're not done yet. They estimate as many as 550,000 borrowers could benefit from the changes of this program. Now, as for a wider student loan forgiveness, we're still holding on to President Biden's campaign promise to us of $10,000 per student loan borrower. President Biden was asked during his marathon press conference if he still plans to cancel $10,000 in student loans, but he didn't respond. President Biden also extended the student loan repayment pause until May. Now, beyond that, pressure has been building on President Biden for forgiveness of student loans. They could definitely use the good press with midterm elections right around the corner. Now, this level of broad-based forgiveness has also gained support among Democratic leaders, including Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Now, I'm pretty sure that this is only going to ramp up as we get a little bit closer to the student loan pause deadline in May. But what do you guys think? Any other stimulus that you would prefer over that? Drop me a quick comment down below. Mark your calendars, guys. It looks like the Federal Reserve is set to raise interest rates in March. Here's Fed Jerome Powell talking about it.
I'd like to sort of weave some of the strands of your answers together and ask you, as you start to reverse policy, what your goal is. Are you going to be raising interest rates until you get inflation to 2%? Do you want to go below 2% so that on average you get a 2% inflation rate? And because you said we have to protect the employment part of your mandate, is there some sort of circuit breaker that would stop you from raising interest rates on the employment side?
So no, there's nothing in our framework about having inflation run below 2%. So that we would do that, try to achieve that outcome. So the answer to that is no. What we're trying to do is keep inflation expectations well anchored at 2%. That's always the ultimate goal, and we do that in the service of having inflation. We get to that goal by having inflation average 2% over time. I mean, if inflation doesn't average 2% over time, then it's not clear why inflation expectations would be anchored at 2%. So that's the way we think about that. What was the last part of your question?
I was asking if you're protecting the employment side of the mandate, whether there's some sort of circuit breaker there.
Nothing like that. I mean, I would say you have a tremendously strong labor market, and you have growth this year at forecast to be well above potential. I mean, people are forecasting growth. If you think potential growth is around 2, most forecasts are significantly above that for 2022, and that's even with policy becoming substantially less accommodative. So the labor market's going to be strong for some time. Ideally, what we're trying to achieve is inflation getting back down to 2%, and we're trying to do that in a process that will also leave the labor market in a very strong position. And no one really knows what that will take. Again, I would say that it isn't just monetary policy that's helping inflation get down. It'll be supply side improvements, and it'll be less fiscal impulse in all likelihood. So, but monetary policy will do our job. It is our job to get inflation down to 2%, and a situation where the two goals can be in tension is a difficult one. But I don't really think they are here, though, because I think a really significant threat to further strengthening in the labor market in the form of higher participation over time is high inflation. And also, high inflation is taking away the benefits of some of these large wage increases that we're seeing now. So we do hope to achieve, and our plan is to achieve both of those goals.
Wait, why is he talking about inflation? I thought we were on interest rates. Well, here's the deal, guys. The Fed's planning to hike interest rates to control inflation. Right now, short-term interest rates in the US are essentially zero. This was done way back in March 2020 when lockdowns were first starting and they were preparing for this big recession. Now, after the 2-month recession, the Fed kept rates at rock bottom because many workers and businesses still needed support with the pandemic. The big problem for the Fed now is that the US consumer prices have surged. For 10 months in a row, inflation has been well above the Fed's 2% target and reached an annual pace of around 7% in December. Now, this is the highest rate of inflation recorded in the US in the last 40 years. High inflation means that the prices that people pay for goods and services is just continually going up, especially for basic items like meat, gasoline, as well as manufactured goods like cars. I mean, heck, I'm pretty sure that you've seen the prices of used cars going through the roof, haven't you? Now, if higher inflation just keeps going and becomes entrenched, it would actually damage our economy. And the longer it lasts, the harder and more painful for consumers and businesses that it's going to be to bring it back to a more sustainable 2%. So the Fed has to act quickly, like almost now, before it's too late. Skipping all the economic mumbo jumbo, higher interest rates means borrowers would need to pay more for loans that you get. So let's just say if the Fed lifts interest rates this year by say 0.75%, right? As expected, this would translate into about $45,000 in additional interest payments on a 30-year, $300,000 mortgage. And so what this means is that if you want to borrow to start a business, pay for college, buy a car, or do anything else, you should definitely expect your borrowing costs to be higher later this year. Now, on the other hand, your bank deposits and bonds should also go up too. On a broader scale, higher interest rates would likely slow down business activity. Now, while this can actually help reduce inflation, it also means lower economic growth. Hopefully, with the Fed raising interest rates and supply ramping back up, inflation and prices could actually calm down. Now, as Jerome Powell said, quote, "We're committed to our price stability goals. We will use our tools both to support the economy and a strong labor market and to prevent higher inflation from becoming entrenched," end quote. Another one to watch out for in our coming updates, guys. Make sure you're always tuned in. Hit that subscribe button and tap that notification bell. While we're on the topic, inflation is actually one of the main reasons advocates are pushing for a 4th round of stimulus checks. As of the latest count, more than 95,000 people have signed a petition for the Senior Citizens League to provide a one-time $1,400 check for seniors. Social Security recipients are definitely getting beaten by inflation. Even with the 5.9% cost of living increase that went into effect in January, we're still well behind the 7% inflation rate right now. According to the Senior Citizens League, quote, "The $1,400 check would buy an extra week of groceries for a few months. A stimulus payment would help them manage with these higher rising costs," end quote. I'll keep you guys posted, of course. We'll be the first to know as soon as they announce more details on it. Now, another major stimulus event, President Biden, he met with 10 CEOs from big companies like Microsoft, General Motors, also known as GM, and Ford. But let's look at the recap.
President Joe Biden met with 10 CEOs here at the White House Wednesday. His aim, to pitch to the private sector his Build Back Better agenda as it remains stalled in Congress.
It's clearly an issue that needs to be addressed.
For Cummins CEO Tom Linebarger, his top priority is talking to President Biden about taking an engine manufacturing company green. He hopes Congress will act to provide tax incentives and other measures to ensure corporate America focuses on reducing greenhouse gases.
I really don't see how, if I finish my time as leading Cummins and I'm talking to my grandkids, I can tell them that I didn't do as much as I could do. And so I'm pretty much putting everything I have into it. Our whole company is rethought how we can do our work.
Siemens CEO Barbara Humpton agrees with Linebarger and his focus on addressing long-term climate change. Humpton says the executives also talked about supply chain woes and inflation impacting some American companies.
The president did bring that up and acknowledges that there is concern about that, but also quoted the experts who are advising him that the policies that he's putting forward would actually moderate inflation, would actually have a positive economic advantage.
The group also discussed other issues facing the private sector, like childcare, returning to in-person work, and more. The CEOs tell us the president once again mentioned the possibility of breaking up his massive Build Back Better plan into a few smaller pieces of legislation, hoping that helps to usher through at least some of his widespread agenda. Reporting in Washington, I'm Peter Zampa.
Looking at the transcript, the two main areas that they talked about were childcare and climate change stimulus. And we heard them talking about climate a little bit in the video. Cummins CEO Tom Linebarger's top priority was talking to President Biden about taking an engine manufacturing company green. He also hopes that Congress will act to provide tax incentives and other measures to ensure corporate America focuses on reducing greenhouse gases. Now, he said, "I really don't see how. If I finish my time as leading Cummins and I'm talking to my grandkids, I can tell them that I didn't do as much as I could do. So I'm pretty much putting everything I have into it. Our whole company is redesigned, rethought how we do our work," end quote. Siemens CEO Barbara Humpton, she agreed and went on a TV interview right after highlighting how important these climate provisions are.
In a move to try to push his agenda forward, President Biden invited 10 major U.S. company CEOs to join him at the White House. The president focused on ways that his Build Back Better plan would help the U.S. economy and lower inflation, in his view, in the long term. Joining us now with the details of the meeting is Barbara Humpton, President and CEO of Siemens U.S. She attended the meeting at the White House. And over the years, I've seen a lot of meetings at the White House, and it's funny the way, depending on who the president is at the time, the CEOs are going to get flack one way or another from someone out there. Although everybody should go and listen to what the president has to say without having a predetermined idea of whether they're going to be for it or against it. When you walked out of there, Barbara, were you sold? Did he convince you that this is something we should do?
Well, Joe, you may be surprised to hear that that actually wasn't the way the president ran the meeting. He actually flipped around and asked us what's important to us. So it was a real privilege to be there with my colleagues and then to represent the 40,000 employees and 24,000 suppliers of Siemens US, really talking about the things that are priorities for us. And it was an opportunity for us to share with the administration our belief that this is a decade for climate action and that Siemens is ready with the technologies that will help us make the transition within the energy sector, help us bring manufacturing back to the US, and yes, help us bring high-speed rail here.
But there were some business groups that were positive about the meeting. There were others that pointed out that some of the provisions of the bill they see as that would be headwinds for business, whether it's the corporate taxes or some of the other provisions in the original Build Back Better plan, that maybe small business origination could be hurt. Which things do you think would it, in your view, you'd pass the bill as it was, or you'd pick the parts that you think would be favorable, not just to Siemens USA, but to corporate America in general?
Yeah, I think the president has been talking to Americans about the fact that there are pieces of this that are more likely to pass in this, basically in the Congress that we have today and what we anticipate for the future. So I believe this is one of the primary reasons for talking, is to say, what are the most important things to pass right now? The president is absolutely committed to his full agenda. But what I heard, and again, what I voiced, is that we really think the climate provisions are some of the most important, and the provisions that deal with building the new infrastructure, especially for rural America, bringing folks online with both power and high-speed communications so they can participate in the digital economy. These are the things that if we invest now, they will pay dividends for Americans for decades to come.
Biden's comments on the topic, quote, "Our Build Back Better plan, combined with the infrastructure law, we're making the biggest investment in clean energy manufacturing ever in American history," end quote. General Motors CEO Mary Barra, she said that she looks forward to working with President Biden and Congress on provisions like electric vehicle tax credits and advancing manufacturing credits, as well as the CHIPS Act, which invests in manufacturing and address the global semiconductor shortage. Stimulus alert, guys, that is a $12,500 tax credit for you if they push through with this with the electric vehicle talks. Infamous Senate holdout Joe Manchin, he said in a recent interview that a deal could be struck on climate spending provisions. His exact words, quote, "In climate, I think there's a lot of areas in climate we agree. The only thing I've ever said, you cannot eliminate your way to a cleaner environment," end quote.
In terms of Build Back Better, though, what are you willing to support?
And it's not that. First of all, let's make sure that we understand where we are in the country. The greatest challenge we face right now for every American is inflation. That's the greatest. And I think the president realizes that. He recognizes that. In climate, I think that there's a lot of areas in climate that we agree. The only thing I've ever said, you cannot eliminate your way to a cleaner environment. That means by stopping, don't use this, don't use that. The rest of the world won't. They'll use whatever they have. You can innovate your way through technology, and that's what I want to do.
As for childcare, Biden said, quote, "My plan cuts in half for most families the cost of childcare, helping their budgets and helping millions of parents, especially women, get back to work," end quote. He also mentioned that universal pre-K in the Build Back Better bill will create, quote, "the best educated workforce." Microsoft President Brad Smith said that the childcare provisions are essential to getting Americans to return to work. What we see is we need to do more to help bring Americans back to work, and one of the key ingredients that we see is that people can only come back to work if they have a way to take care of their children, end quote. March 1st is the deadline that progressive leaders are pushing for the Build Back Better bill. They said the timing would give President Biden a very much needed opportunity to announce a major accomplishment during his State of the Union address. Now let's just read some of the parts of the statement. Quote, "In the months since negotiation around the Build Back Better Act stalled, the case for this legislation has only become more urgent. There is agreement among Senate Democrats on significant parts of this bill: climate action, the care economy, taking on big farmers' price gouging, and lowering healthcare costs. There is agreement on the need to reduce rising costs facing ordinary Americans, and that is exactly what Build Back Better does," end quote. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, he pretty much agrees here when he predicted that the large portions of President Biden's Build Back Better agenda can become law before the midterm elections, listing provisions including universal early education and climate programs. Progressive Caucus Chair Pramila Jayapal highlighted how much Americans are hurting right now and how the bill could actually help out. Quote, "Public housing residents have endured devastating fires. The cost of insulin and other prescription drugs continue to crush working people, and people are desperate for child care support. This desperately needed relief cannot be delayed any longer," end quote. Our latest prediction is that BBB 2.0 is likely to emerge somewhere between February 18th and President Biden's State of the Union address on March 1st. February 18th is a key date in Washington, D.C. because that's when another funding measure needs to get enacted in order to avoid a partial government shutdown. That's also just a couple days away from now, so definitely watch out in our coming updates. So for now, that was today's stimulus package update and daily news update. Student loan forgiveness for 70,000 borrowers, the Fed hiking interest rates in March, inflation going back down to a manageable 2%, President Biden's big stimulus meeting with top CEOs, and finally, new dates for the Build Back Better 2.0. I really hope you guys are getting excited about all this stuff. I sure am, and I definitely feel my stimulus senses tingling. All the new stimulus money that we're seeing on the horizon. Just stick with me, guys. I promise we will keep watching this thing until we reach the stimulus finish line together. Remember, I always appreciate you guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and for showing love by hitting that like button. More exciting news for you guys in the next big update. See you guys then.